I'm going to end one.
Okay. So we're going to be learning about the Zohar that talks about the relevancy of the offerings in the temple. One of the things that we have very little understanding of today is this. It's very alien, even to the most religious Jews, is this idea of an offering, of bringing an animal as a sacrifice. It's very it's a visceral thing that we react to negatively. We just don't. In fact, somebody was just telling me they scream at God about it. They're so angry about it. So. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the Zohar, because the Zohar is something that really brings this idea, makes it relevant, makes it to be not just relevant, but a powerful method that we could use in our inner life. Let me first just say that the Zohar's main preoccupation is the idea of bringing together the masculine and feminine aspects of the divine. We call the masculine aspects the Kutsha Brichu, the Holy One, blessed be He, and the feminine aspect of the divine, the Shekhinah, the divine presence. And even though the Talmud always refers to the Shekhinah, it also refers to Kutsha Brichu, but usually the Shekhinah is referencing the part of the divine that goes into exile, or that rests with us. Even the Torah says, "Hashochan itam b'toch tumasam," that the Shekhinah is in our presence. God's presence is with us, even in our state of defilement. So that's the basic premise of the Zohar, is that we're creating God's image. That's the Torah, right? And God, the whole Torah is a series of intra-divine communication. God's aspects talking to each other. The primary relationship is the male-female aspects of God. Kutsha Brichu Shechinte, the Holy One, blessed be the Shekhinah. And because we were created in God's image, we have a soul that has aspects of the divine, so we actually enter into the intra-divine communication. This is the basics, these are the fundamentals of the Zohar. And then the question becomes, well, how do we actually do that? And where do we do that? You see, it's interesting, because one of the things that the Ari talks about, that the Ari is most famous for, but probably really the source of it is the Ramban. The Ramban has a one-chapter commentary. We don't know what happened to the other chapters on the Sefer Yetzirah. There's the common Pirush of the Ramban is actually not the Ramban, it's somebody else. But there is one chapter on the Sefer Yetzirah that we do have that's kind of authenticated, that is the Ramban. And he talks about Tzimtzum there. He does talk about Tzimtzum. What's interesting, what the Ramban does is, it's in that same chapter, he talks about Chachma and Bina. The Gemara usually actually refers to Chachma and Bina in a way that contradicts conventional Kabbalistic description. Chachma is usually the first insight, and Bina is understanding, processing, analytical. And the Gemara actually says that Bina is Mevin Davar Mitoch Davar, is Chachma is what you learn, the Talmud says, what you're taught. And Bina is when you understand on your own. You what's the word, when you not analyze, when you're given an idea and that gives you insight into another idea. You have your own understanding, like a chidush. So it's just the opposite of what the Kabbalah says. So in that chapter, the Ramban actually kind of reconciles the Kabbalah of Chachma and Bina with the Talmud of Chachma and Bina, and says that that we don't understand Chachma except in Bina. That's actually not the point. The point I wanted to bring about is not the Chachma Bina. The point is about the Tzimtzum. The idea is that the classical term Tzimtzum is usually referred to as Tzimtzum Shechinaso ben Badei Aron, some form of God limiting His presence to a specific area, where He reveals Himself in the temple, He reveals Himself in the Holy of Holies, by the place of the Ark, and that's where His presence is revealed to Moses. Right. So, what does that mean? It means God is a big God, yet He's choosing to willfully limit Himself so that we have a relationship with Him. That is the key. He wants a relationship with us. There's the bigger God, but the whole premise of Judaism, which actually the other philosophies took even further, because their whole idea is you worship the particular forces of nature, and they forgot about the bigger. So we have this, we believe in the bigger God, that's the God of everything that's infinite, and yet we still believe that He's limiting Himself. Right? That's what the whole Zohar is. So comes the Ramban in this commentary, and he wants to connect this idea to creation, to this idea of the Tzimtzum, that we give attribution of the idea of Tzimtzum to the Ari, but already is found in this Ramban, where he says that in creation there was similarly a initial kind of contraction. He's not marach in it. The Ramban doesn't really dwell on it. It's just like 2 lines, but but it's there. It's pretty clearly there.
When you say Tzimtzum in basic English, means He compressed
usually
his infinite presence into a finite quantity.
People like Gershon Sholem, they say that it's the opposite. God is everywhere, and then He kind of compresses His everywhereness to only reveal Himself in a particular place. And in the Ari, God's presence is just, it's like it's going away from this center. He refers to it as a center, from the center of whatever is or isn't. So the Ramban says it's not that different. The principles are the same. They're just applied a little bit differently. But the idea is that God then has to, just like He created a human being, to be in to enter into this intra-divine relationship with Him, He also creates a space where that happens.
That's Tzimtzum. Because if you compress
That's what the Mishkan
is. You're creating a vacuum.
So what the Mishkan in effect is a place where God is everywhere, yet He's choosing to make Himself available more in a particular place. We also have the idea of this kind of tzimtzum in time, where God is present every day of the week, but yet a Shabbos or a Yom Kippur, the Daf Yomi yesterday, is like this crazy. It's like this crazy thing about Yom Kippur, like a discussion. It was Rosh Lakish again, Yochanan, right? We were just talking about that, where they're debating. There's one opinion that says Yom Kippur forgives you if you sin on Yom Kippur. It's such a strong way of forgiveness that they question how the Torah could say that there's karas for violating Yom Kippur. How could you? You can't. It's just like impossible. The Gemara has to start coming up with scenarios according to that opinion. I mean, this is Gemara. This is not like some Kabbalist or something. And this means that there's a moment in time, a day in time, Achas Bashana, it's a singular time of the year, unique time of the year, where there's this tremendous forgiveness in the world. Well, let me ask you something. What about the rest of the year? Right? Shabbos, what about the rest of the week? Isn't Shabbos? Shabbos is this divine revelation. What about the rest of the week? But the answer is that God works in this particular way where he limits himself. In fact, the whole idea of why we believe what we believe, there used to be philosophers, they spent lots of time using the science of their days, even Maimonides. What's Maimonides' big proof about the unity of God? It's what today we call it gravity. They didn't know from gravity. So on a very simplistic level, that's why Maimonides was dated right away. That's why a lot of people moved to the Zohar, because it was like his science was good for like what, 10 years, 100 years. Like, how long can science stay science? Science is changing all the time. So he's like, it's known that the only force that could make these bodies in heaven, the stars, the planets, orbit in a circle, is an infinite power. And that proves that God is only one and he doesn't have a body. And it's all based on these like science that they understood. So we moved away from that. You don't find like I was listening to Shlomo the other day, and he has this like really anti-science of religion thing, where he's like bashing people who try to prove God's existence. Like they're going to prove it like scientifically that God exists. And he says something interesting. He's like, I once saw a man get up and talk about how he loves his wife for an hour. If you love your wife, you shouldn't have to talk about it for an hour if you love her. It should just be understood you love her. But so Shlomo's point is that if you believe in God, you just believe in God. You don't need to write a book about why, but it's more than that. And I remember Lubavitcher Rebbe addressing this. And this is what there's still a little discussion. Can we use science? In fact, I actually picked up a book. An avowed atheist is setting out to disprove God. There's a number of these books in Barnes & Noble. So I picked it up, and I have to tell you, I was so impressed that he was actually bringing really some strong proof for God's existence and trying to disprove it. And he had, in some cases, he was really saying, listen, I'd rather say something ridiculous than believe in God. It was it was amazing that he said it. I'd rather believe in something that's like very unlikely, but at least it's not as irrational as believing in God. And he says, so I'm like, oh, okay, so it's actually, usually you pick up one of these books and you're like, this guy has a good point. This is the opposite. You read this book, you're like, oh, this guy he acknowledges that some of the arguments of atheism are on very thin ice, so to speak. But getting back to the Zohar, getting back to we want to talk about Vayikra. We want to talk about what is the meaning of the Mishkan, the Karbanot, the offerings of the Mishkan. And what we're saying is that God is limiting himself. And getting back to why God what do we know about God? We know about God what people tell us about God. Let's be honest. We know about God. Why? The people say they heard it from God.
No. We know his attributes, we don't know anything about.
But who tells
you enough of you?
So the question is basically, how do we know God is one and not two? So we used to have there's proofs scientifically, according to that understanding of science, that God could be one and can't be two. Right? But the Lubavitcher Rebbe and others have said, it's very simple.